All right, today we're diving into something that on the surface seems completely wild. We're going to connect one of the most dedicated and, let's be honest, kind of obsessive communities in online gaming with this timeless quest for spiritual focus. I know, it sounds like they have nothing to do with each other, but stick with me, because the lessons hidden inside are, well, they're surprisingly deep.
So let's really just start with this question. I mean, think about it. What if the real key to spiritual focus was actually hiding inside a video game? It sounds almost ridiculous, doesn't it? The idea that you could find genuine, tangible spiritual growth in a virtual world. But the source material we're looking at today makes a fascinating argument. By choosing to be vulnerable in a game, we can learn a powerful lesson about building real strength in our actual lives.
And this journey, it's framed as this epic battle. But the enemies here, they're not the digital monsters you see on the screen. No, they're our own internal demons, right? The distractions, the laziness, that lack of discipline we all struggle with. The path forward is often lonely and incredibly demanding, a place where every single choice, every single step carries this immense weight.
Okay, so let's get specific. In the fantasy world of old-school RuneScape, pretty much every player levels up their defense skill to wear stronger armor. It just makes sense. But there's this tiny, super dedicated community that does the exact opposite. They are the One Defense Pures. They intentionally lock their defense at the lowest possible level. This makes them what gamers call a glass cannon. They can deal out massive damage, but they're incredibly fragile. Now think about that for a second. We're talking hundreds, even thousands of hours of gameplay that can be instantly and permanently ruined by a single misclick. The entire project gone forever.
And this is the real heart of the challenge. There's no safe middle ground here. You're either walking this razor's edge with relentless discipline or you fall. And that's it. Every choice you make either preserves the purity of this journey or it destroys it completely. It's this stark all-or-nothing dynamic that takes a simple game and turns it into this profound, high-stakes exercise in constant, moment-to-moment vigilance.
So let's start to walk this path of purity ourselves, because as our source material so compellingly argues, this is about so much more than just a game. It's really a framework for understanding a much deeper, much more personal struggle that, exists within all of us.
This quote from the source, it absolutely nails it. Focus is the battlefield of the soul. For a One Defense Pure, the real enemy isn't some dragging or monster in the game. It's the boredom. It's the distraction. It's that temptation to just take a shortcut. Every single hour they choose to stay on this incredibly difficult path is a victory on that internal battlefield.
And that brings us right to the inner battlefield itself. This constant fight against distraction. In the game, this looks like long, repetitive, and often mind-numbing tasks, what players just call the grind. And you know what? This grind is a perfect mirror for our own daily struggle to stay focused on what actually matters in a world that feels like it was designed to pull our attention in a million different directions at once.
The source describes this whole process as a mirror of the soul, which is such a great way to put it, because it really does reflect our own internal state. It's not always this heroic adventure. Far from it. There are these long, lonely stretches of doubt, where you're just asking yourself, why am I even doing this? There are moments of this profound dryness, where your motivation just completely evaporates. But the key insight here is that these moments, they aren't signs of failure. They are, as the source puts it, inevitable companions on any worthy journey. So, when you're in the middle of that storm of distraction and doubt, where do you find an anchor? The source offers a really clear answer: prayer. And it's presented not as some passive comfort, but as an active, practical tool. It's like a mental and spiritual sanctuary you can retreat to, one that gives you clarity and renews your resolve at the exact moment you feel the most lost.
And this gets us to the heart of the source's whole argument: prayer as the anchor. The idea is that prayer acts as a kind of reset button for your soul. It takes those moments where you feel weak, distracted, and just ready to give up, and it transforms them into opportunities to practice what the source calls humble vigilance.
And according to the source, what you asked for is absolutely crucial. This isn't about praying for the game to get easier or for some lucky break. No, it's about asking for internal strength. First, you ask for clarity, the ability to see your goal clearly through all the fog of daily distractions. Second, you ask for strength, not just physical endurance, but spiritual strength to handle those feelings of doubt. And finally, you ask for perseverance, that raw, stubborn will to just keep putting one foot in front of the other, especially when the finish line is absolutely nowhere in sight.
So this brings us from the why to the how.
I mean, it's one thing to talk about these big ideas, but the source actually proposes a concrete strategy for putting them into action. It creates a direct line from the struggle of this warrior to the discipline of a spiritual practice.
And this is where things get super practical. The source offers this memorable, actionable framework you can apply not just in a game, but in your daily life. It's called the PRAY method.
All right, let's just walk through this real quick. It's a 4-step cycle. It starts with P for pause. Before you even begin a task, you intentionally just stop. You take a breath. You silence the noise around you and the noise inside your own head. Next up is R for rejoice. You take a moment to be grateful for the progress you've already made, no matter how small it seems. This builds positive momentum. Then comes A for ask. This is where you bring those specific needs we just talked about: clarity, strength, patience. And finally, Y for yield. You let go of that anxious need to control everything. You trust the process, and then you begin your work.
And to make this even more real, the source gives us what it calls 5 spiritual weapons against the common enemies of focus. Think of these as super targeted prayers for specific struggles. There's a prayer against the temptation of delay, a prayer for wisdom in setting your priorities, a prayer for the courage to just begin, which, let's be real, is often the hardest part, and finally, a prayer for that deep focus you need to see a task all the way through to the end.
This simple phrase right here, faith fuels focus, it really sums up the entire idea. It answers that fundamental question. What happens when your own willpower just runs out? What do you do when the motivation is gone and the grind feels totally pointless? Well, the source argues that this is where faith takes over. It becomes the fuel that carries you the rest of the way. It's a huge shift from relying only on yourself to drawing strength from something greater. And this brings us to the ultimate payoff, right? The victory beyond the game. Because the source makes it crystal clear that the goal was never really about leveling up some character on a screen. The real transformation is about the character you build within yourself. It's about the virtues that get forged in the fire of this difficult, self-imposed limitation. So the first virtue you forge is patience. As the source puts it, long grinds teach you that the most meaningful things take time. Just think about how radical that is. We live in a world of instant downloads, next-day delivery, and immediate gratification. Choosing a path that might not show any real results for months or even years is a deeply countercultural act. It's like an intentional training program against the frantic urgency of modern life. It fundamentally reshapes your relationship with time and effort, and it teaches you that true growth is often slow, it's incremental, and it's pretty much invisible from one day to the next. The second virtue is humility. Now remember, choosing to be a Defence Pure is a choice to be weak, to be vulnerable. It's intentionally saying no to the power and the armor that's freely available to everybody else. The source argues this isn't weakness at all, but a radical act of discipline and spiritual maturity. It's understanding that true strength sometimes comes from setting your ego aside. It's that recognition that you don't need to be invulnerable to be powerful, and that accepting your own limitations can actually open the door to a different, more focused kind of strength.
And finally, the third virtue is hope. Because during those long, dry, seemingly endless stretches of the grind, where progress feels completely invisible, hope is the guiding star. It's that quiet, persistent belief that all of your small, consistent, daily efforts are actually adding up to something meaningful, even if you can't see the proof yet. It's not some loud, crazy optimism, but a quiet resolve that what you're doing matters, and that the character you are building through this whole process is way more valuable than any reward the game could ever offer.
And so we arrive at the true reward. It was never about a maxed-out character or some rare digital item. It's the internal transformation. The peace, the purpose, and the resilience that you build along the way, these are the real victories. These are the treasures that go way beyond the game and enrich every single aspect of your actual life. The source wraps up its argument with this really powerful verse from Proverbs, which just perfectly summarizes the core message. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans. It suggests that when you anchor your work, whether that's a grind in a game, a project at your job, or the slow work of personal growth, when you anchor it to a higher purpose, your plans are built on a foundation that just cannot be shaken.
And so that leaves us with one final and I think provocative question to carry with us. The Defence Pure finds incredible strength by choosing a specific path of weakness. So the question for you is this: where in your life, in your work, your habits, your relationships, where could embracing an intentional limitation unlock a deeper focus and a greater strength that you never even knew you possessed?